Good morning. I'm Yvonne Garcia, Chief of Staff to State Street's Chairman and CEO and Global Head of our Communications and CEO Experience Program. Welcome to the fifth in our series of conversations about justice, equity, and inclusion, hosted by the Massachusetts and Texas Conferences for Women, State Street, and the Boston Globe. We launched this series 1 year ago this month, a year in which there has been a profound awakening in our businesses, communities, and country around justice, equity, and inclusion. I am truly excited to share that the response to the series over the last 12 months has been tremendous. We've had over 17,000 registrants, men and women, who are committed to learning, growing, and making a difference. Now, how incredible is that? We're making progress and moving in the right direction. However, we have also seen the rise of cancel culture. And I think you all know how this plays out. Someone well-known says or does something controversial, and then, in the words of today's speaker, Betty Hart, they are made persona non grata. They are done, not part of our world anymore. It's important to recognize that the people who engage in cancel culture are often driven by a positive intention. They're passionate about supporting justice, equity, and inclusion, and they strongly oppose those who do not. But cancel culture also leads to some negative outcomes. It makes people afraid of speaking out, afraid of being shamed, afraid of revealing what they may not know. And what happens then is that learning is canceled, growth is canceled, teachable moments are canceled. So how do we find a better path forward, one that encourages learning and growth while advancing justice, equity, and inclusion? To guide us through a discussion of this important question, we're delighted to have Betty Hart with us. Betty is a theater artist, a woman of faith, whose mission is to help create space for necessary conversations. She gave a TEDx talk last year that was soon elevated to TED.com because of its simple, heartfelt, illuminating idea. Instead of cancel culture, we need compassion culture. Betty is a director, actor, and facilitator who strives to be a change agent and a force for positivity, creativity, and collaboration. She has worked in facilitation for more than 20 years. Betty will open today's discussion with remarks and then lead a panel discussion with an esteemed panel of executives, including Talia Mingo, Executive Director of the American Globe Lead with Bristol Myers Squibb Network of Women, Jocelyn Williams, a business diversity and inclusion leader for Raytheon Intelligence and Space, a business of Raytheon Technologies, and Damon Diener, an employee experience leader responsible for the crafting of employee journeys and moments that matter for IBM and its clients' diverse global workforces. Before we get started, I wanted to note that today's session is being recorded and a replay link will be emailed to all registrants within the next day or so. Please be sure to share this link with others so that they can view and benefit from the amazing session and learnings that we're about to receive. Now let's please give a warm virtual welcome to Betty Hart.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. It is a great honor to be speaking with you. I am humbled and grateful. For those who cannot see me, my name is Betty Hart. My pronouns are she and her, and a description of myself is an African-American female, some call striking, whose head has been shaved bald. And with that, I'd love to begin. If you are like me, it could be easy to be overwhelmed by the enormity of problems facing our society today. The challenges are large, vast, and have been with us for multiple generations. If it has taken all of this time for the problems to develop and become deep-rooted, it could make sense to say, what can I do to solve them? I'd like to suggest that as long as we think in terms of I, we will never make true progress toward our goals. Though as Americans, we love to cling to the idea of individualism, the reality is that we succeed best in community. For everyone who truly believes that they pulled themselves up by their own metaphorical bootstraps, I ask you, how did you acquire the boot with bootstraps in the first place? To believe that we did it all on our own would indicate that as babies, we prepared our own food, made our own clothes, changed our own diapers, taught ourselves how to speak and walk in isolation. It didn't happen that way. Regardless of the circumstances of our births, we had someone help us along the way. The problems that we currently face weren't created in isolation either. Though the spark of an idea may be credited to an individual, many individuals were necessary for that idea to take hold. I would love to claim full credit for who I am today. It can make me feel good to think I am the product of my own creation. The truth, however, is something different. I had phenomenal parents and grandparents and godparents and siblings and teachers and friends and family and colleagues who all knowingly or unknowingly helped shape me. Every book, every article, podcast, conversation, television show, film, museum, mountain, beach, all of it shaped me to become the person I am. The kindness that people have shown me for no apparent reason. I am the recipient of prayers, affirmations, praise, critiques, judgments, and mistakes. If you look over your own life, no doubt you'll also find that there was someone, or perhaps many, who've helped you become who you are today. When I was in junior high school, I was on the path to becoming a full-fledged snob. Looking down on others seemed cool, and despite my mother's abhorrence with this attitude, I reveled in it. Youth. I knew everything then. At the end of the 9th grade, however, my mom and one of my brothers moved from Miami to Atlanta, to a city called Stone Mountain. This was a different world. Miami is perhaps the most northern city in the South, and I moved to what seemed to be the actual South. It's interesting to note that Atlanta is certainly not the most southern of cities by a long shot, but to a young 15-year-old girl, it might have well have been. Before I moved, I was an extrovert who loved to read. I preferred books to people, though you never would have known it by my gregarious nature. Mourning the loss of the life that I had in Miami, missing my friends deeply, and having no understanding what were the cultural rules and mores of this new high school, I retreated to the world of books. I didn't speak in class. I did my work, and I read books. In every class, my head was in a book. I didn't socialize. Even at lunch, I sat by myself and read books. And I was content. An odd thing happened, however. People who I would never have spoken to as a snob in training reached out and befriended me. They chose to be kind to me when they knew nothing about me. It was the most curious thing. They saw me when I was virtually invisible most of the day. In the second quarter or semester, I don't remember which system we were on back then, I came into my own. I was my own outgoing self. I participated actively in class, and people began to notice me. The cool or the popular kids began to speak to me, and they would say things like, "Are you new here? Did you just come to this school?" And I would respond, "No, I sat behind you all of last quarter." You see, they didn't notice me because I had been quiet. This simple idea and aspect of my life changed everything for me. I saw that I had become part of a system that saw some as less than because of a series of criteria that had been arbitrarily created. And I vowed to become something more than I had been, and I was determined to never forget the kindness that people showed me when it appeared that I was the other. I couldn't have become who I am today without both my mom's admonitions for me to be different and the loving kindness of people who simply saw me. My mom nor my friends would ever know fully what their actions would do for me. I liken that to how the work that you are embarking on in the realm of social justice will benefit people who you may never meet. If you succeed in bringing gender parity and racial equity into your respective workplaces, others will benefit in ways that you can't imagine now. And that's beautiful. Here's the catch. You can't do it alone. Humans were created to be in community. We were not meant to be in isolation. Surely pandemic life helped to illustrate this. This includes in the workplace. We're better together. Ideas in isolation are not solutions. They must be put into practice. And before they should be put into practice, they should be vetted and tested by a myriad of people. Your brilliance needs to be weighted by someone else's temperance, and their brilliance by your temperance. No one person can see all of the variables. Each of us, because of the filters with which we see the world, will miss something. But together, we can see more and we can do much. So, am I simply saying that we can solve all of our major problems if we work together collaboratively? Yes and no. Collaboration without sufficient resources will only take us so far. We need community and we need resources, and we need a willingness to live in discomfort. Yes, I am asking us to be uncomfortable. Change is constant and causes great anxiety in many of us. As children, we wanted to grow, to become taller, to become something other than we were at a given time. And when change came, it caused all kinds of confusion at first because the change was never exactly the way we had anticipated. How can we address change as a community while still recognizing the need for individual accountability? It's a great question. First, we must decide that working together requires us to have a genuine appreciation for one another. I do not have to like your fashion style to admire your capacity for strategic thinking. I don't have to love numbers to appreciate your brilliance with spreadsheets. You see, there's an interesting duality of humans that is part of our makeup, our framework, if you will. And we're in a time where we reject the duality of humans. We seemingly want people to be one thing or the other. You're either good or you're bad. We don't enjoy the complexity that most of us are both. You can be a wonderful parent and be someone who doesn't recycle. You can be an incredible leader at work and a really lousy partner at home. You can be a great friend in a crisis and an average friend in the day-to-day. We can be both. Accepting the duality of our humanity is crucial to being able to work alongside one another. It is the lack of acceptance of this that propels cancel culture. You see, someone says or does something that isn't good or acceptable to the current school of thought, and that person becomes an outcast. We do this to individuals we know, to celebrities and politicians we don't, and to corporations. We've created a set of rules that doesn't allow for growth or change or the recognition of any of us being wrong. This path doesn't lead to a more just or equitable society. It simply changes who becomes bound on our mutual quest to freedom. When we choose compassion and curiosity, we are acknowledging a humility that says, I do not always know, nor am I always right, and I choose to suffer alongside you as we journey. I will choose to take stock of how your words impact me. I'll choose to reflect upon it, and I'll choose to bring my concerns to you, recognizing that you can still choose what to do with that. I will not summarily reject you. I'll recognize you as one of value, just as I am one of value. I'll choose to work with you for a cause that is greater than us both, because true change requires sacrifice in order to achieve it. I would love to achieve social and racial justice on my own, but since I couldn't create it by myself, I can't dismantle it by myself, and neither can you. I need you. And you need me. Together, we can accomplish this. What might happen if we choose to delve deeper into someone else's why? Might we find a place of common ground that could help us navigate this ship together? Could we possibly go past the surface aspects like title or position to move to a place where your intrinsic value is deeper? Change always seems impossible until it happens. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream has been partially realized, but not fully. We can bemoan that it has been over 50 years and it still hasn't happened. And we can be inspired by what his partnership with people of every hue accomplished and how it gives us tools to use today. Dr. King's inner circle did not always agree. They did not all want to use nonviolence as a strategy, actively disagreed. They voiced their opinions and decided to work towards something bigger, something greater than any of their individual goals and desires. They had love and respect for their leader, even while they doubted him. We can doubt. We can question. We can and should challenge systems, especially systems of oppression. And we must work together to create a more equitable system. The desire to reach equity will not happen by wishing and hoping alone. It will not happen when only a few of us work toward it. You see, we'll see racial and social justice occur in waves as we work together. When we work together collaboratively, in community, using compassion and curiosity, we'll discover solutions that we never could have individually. We'll recognize the uncomfortable new frontiers, and we will boldly go where no one has gone before. Together, we can be part of something that will look radically different centuries from now. In isolation, we cannot succeed, but together, we can. It will start slowly and build with time, with compassion, curiosity, perseverance, a deep and abiding desire for change, and a willingness to do the work together. We can make social and racial justice a reality. Thank you. I am so excited to have this conversation begin to move forward with our incredible panelists. We will start off with the first panelist, but all three will answer the same question first. That question is, as we move toward racial and social justice, how can we effectively coexist with those who believe differently, live differently, and speak differently than us? And how does compassion play a role in this coexistence? To start us off, our first panelist is Damon Diener.
Hi, Betty. Happy to be here. All right, so I think I'll jump in with a quick introduction. I think that's where you'd like us to start. So Damon Diener, I'm a Director of Employee Experience and Design at IBM. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm a white gay male, originally from the Plains States that now lives in San Diego, California. And lastly, just like Betty, I also have a shaved head. I just keep it slightly more fuzzy. All right, and Betty, should I jump into the question, or do we want to do the other intros?
Yeah, actually it's a great idea. Let's do the intros so that we can flow with our questions. So I love that idea, Damon. Let's do it. Our second panelist will be Thalia Mingo. Thalia, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Betty, and hi, Damien. I'm Thalia Mingo. I am an African-American female with honey caramel colored skin, freckles. My hair is a short brown curly afro. I'm sitting in a conference room with a white background and I'm wearing a lavender top. And I'm really pleased to be here. I am the global lead for the Bristol-Myers Squibb Network of Women, or Be Now, as we refer to it within BMS. It's one of our people and business resource groups. And this is my full-time role. And I'm really happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. And third, but certainly not last, Jocelyn Williams.
Hi, I am Jocelyn Williams. I am the business for Raytheon Intelligence and Space, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion leader, a part of Raytheon Technologies. I am tall. It depends on what month it may be that I will consider myself lean or not lean. I am unabashed in my personality, will always operate to my authentic self. However, I will always be decent, respectful, and in order, but I will never shy away from an uncomfortable conversation.
All right, then let's get started. Our first question to our panelists, and we'll start with you, Damon. As we move toward racial and social justice, how can we effectively coexist with those who believe differently, live differently, and speak differently than us? And how does compassion play a role in this coexistence?
I love this question, and I'm going to try to tackle it in 4 chunks. So I have kind of 4 topics, so bear with me a minute. But I think, what I'm bringing to the conversation is hopefully a good point of view on how we're addressing and having some of these conversations in a large global corporation context. And so in addition to, some of the more traditional diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, there's also a really large focus on building organizational empathy through human-centered design at many organizations. This is a very, very hot topic right now. But I think the first point I want to make is that while this empathy building is incredibly important, it's not the same as compassion. So they are related, but they're not the same. Empathy really comes down to being able to really feel and kind of understand the emotions of someone else and their experience. Compassion is when we want to take those feelings and activate them into a desire to help. And my own personal description of that is, it's like going from the point of view of me being an ally or someone being an ally for me and becoming an accomplice. And that's kind of that mind shift. And for me, that's what compassion is all about. It's about that action-oriented mindset that you need. So in a corporate context, I think we can drive some of this and kind of create the conditions for it across 3 dimensions: personally, and then within our teams, and then at the organizational level. So some personal thoughts are just being intentional about developing meaningful connections with our colleagues. And doing so not only starts to help you build this empathy, but also can drive your own job satisfaction and your own performance. And we all know everything in the work context is hinging on performance. I think another thing we can do as individuals is find places to listen and learn about other people's lived experiences, and making that personal investment to understand the experience of others, and again, continue to build that empathy. At the team level, we use human-centered design techniques and frameworks. At IBM, we have enterprise design thinking, which is our version of design thinking. And one of the key principles there that I love at the team level is to create diverse, empowered teams. And that diversity can come across many different dimensions, but the more diverse a team is, the more innovative and the more successful they are. And, having these teams, being able to, have mindful conversations to build trust and cohesion amongst the team, that's the ideal that we strive for. And then lastly, at the organizational level, I think, helping teams acknowledge the connectedness between our lived experiences outside of work and the experiences we have inside of work. Those two cannot be separated. And being able to provide guidance for empathetic and empowering actions that promote our teams and the team members to do their best work. And then the last thing at the org level, I think, is, just in the spirit of active compassion, organizations need to help drive change through the interactions, investments, and actions that impact the behaviors, policies, and deep-seated assumptions that are pervasive throughout our organizations. So I know that was a lot, but I think that it's important to think about it from the individual point of view all the way up to an organizational point of view.
Thank you, Damon. Thalia, as we move toward racial and social justice, how can we effectively coexist with those who believe differently, live differently, and speak differently than us? And how does compassion play a role in this coexistence?
Oh, thank you for the question, Betty. And following Damien, I think I'll build on this on a similar framework as I provide my answer. So individually, I think it's important to acknowledge that, let's be honest, when we hear things that are totally not aligned with our own thinking, there's this tendency to shut down and to not really want to listen anymore. So I think we have to acknowledge that first and be willing to not shut down, but to move forward and dive in. I think my colleague, our colleague panelist, Jocelyn said it, I won't shy away from that difficult conversation. And that's really what we have to be intentional about, really wanting to understand what is being said and why it differs from our own. The why behind it. Let me really understand the why behind it and encourage our teams to do the same thing. When we demonstrate leadership and encouraging voices at the table, being very mindful of not everyone is speaking and asking why they're not speaking, inviting them to speak, inviting them to share perspective that sometimes we'll know it's different, sometimes we won't. But the important thing is intentionally inviting the voice, bringing it forth. And then organizationally, I totally agree with what Damien said. Listening or watching for those organizational structures and constructs that limit the diversity, being able to address them, put programs in place that address them intentionally, but don't give up either. We have a tendency as large organizations to start down a path and say, okay, well, that's not working. Well, really taking the time to uncover why they're not working, continue to move forward with progress to make them work, to encourage that diversity of thought, to encourage that diversity of voice, to bring that to the table, not just from a perspective of, I want to hear what you're saying, but I want to feel it. So I do want to make sure that I'm bringing that in because it is important. It's one thing for me to be empathetic or an organization to be empathetic, but to be really cognizant of feeling what is being felt when someone is I guess I saw in the chat, they said not included, the others, to really understand what that means. Okay.
Thank you so much, Thalia. Jocelyn, same question.
I love this question. And I had to think quickly about what I really wanted to say. And my esteemed colleagues on this panel, y'all are phenomenal. I'm in awe. I'm geeking out on both of you. So thank you. But here's also, in addition to what both Damon and Talia have said, I want to say this. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, may she rest in peace, said, we can disagree without being disagreeable. And when I became a leader, I'm an HR snob, by the way, and I like being that. I have built my brand on relationships and being trusting and being a safe space, even if we don't agree. And so when you think about relationships, whether they are personal or whether they are professional, you always have to think about your approach. And it's important how you say something. Like I said, I'll go there with uncomfortable conversations, but how I go there is just as important as what I've said. I fired people who have hugged me, by the way, because of the relationship. I know that it is critically important to meet people where they are. And while I can be frustrated that you're not as far along in your journey or your mental mindset than I am, but you know what? That's okay, because I can meet you where you are. Because at the end of the day, you can't hear me and you will not be willing to receive from me if my approach is off-putting. So some people who have been in it and have been tormented and in the struggle, And in some cases, you could say you have a right to be angry, you have a right to be frustrated, but I always remember the end goal, the end game. And that compassion in meeting people where they are. And I will say this, as adults, we have two areas of which we can go in terms of crossroads. We can be very arrogant. I've lived a little, I've learned a little. I could be arrogant, I could be prideful. But then ask yourself, is that arrogance allowing you to learn further? I would prefer to go into curiosity. And Betty, you said this, I'll go into curiosity. What is it that I don't know? What is it that I don't understand? And by the way, anytime I put a team together, I want people who are completely different from me, because I will not be a contradiction. I need other ideas and thoughts in order for me to be my best self. So that curiosity will allow you to say, I don't know everything. I still have a lot to learn. Your lived experience is not my lived experience, but I'm not going to deny you of that experience. You could be arrogant, and then you're starting to look for people who just agree with everything that you say, those head nods, yes people. Those, by the way, are sycophants and people that are of no use to anybody. Sorry, my comms people will say, Jocelyn, don't do that. But yes, I am. I'm going to say it. It is about the curiosity that gets us to a place of wanting to understand more. And even if we say, you know, at the end of the day, I still believe this in a particular way, that's okay. That's okay, because that's where, you know, we talked about a personal level, we talked about an organizational level. That is where, if you want to talk about an organizational level, innovation is created because of those differences and because of those differing perspectives. And then if we can let go of self and think about the greater good of all, boom, that's where you start getting to high performing teams and innovation. And I'll go back to where I started. We can disagree without being disagreeable and disrespectful.
Thank you all so much. Well, there are so many questions, so let's just keep diving right in. Thalia, I will start with you. We just heard Jocelyn talk about this idea of curiosity. Could you share some ways that you've generated curiosity to generate compassion and move past this notion of cancel culture?
Oh, it's a great question. Thank you for that question, Betty. So one of the ways that I can say as a leader, I use curiosity is it is really diving in. And when I hear something that is not necessarily aligned with my thinking or very different, it is this question of, tell me more about that. Let's hear more about that. If the conversation is, I guess I want to say the word sideways and not exactly presented in a way that is received well, it's repeat the question and come back. I really want to hear what you're saying and I want to understand it. I think I saw a question around, you know, when someone's so passionate that you can't dive in anymore, the curiosity may hurt. Acknowledge the passion. I really appreciate when someone is so passionate about something they believe in and they want to share it. So use that. Tell me more about why you're so passionate about this. Why is this so important to you? Never stop asking the questions. I'm not saying ask them to belittle, but I mean ask them to really seek to understand. That is one of the ways I think curiosity is very beneficial in attacking cancel culture.
Thank you so much. Jocelyn, I would love to know, what is your organization doing to foster an office culture of curiosity, inclusion, and compassion?
So this is interesting, and I'm going to try to be very, very succinct because, you know, we have just merged as a Raytheon technology organization last April. And advancing our diversity, equity, and inclusion, both from a business perspective and a social perspective, has been imperative based on what our CEO, Greg Hayes, has said. And we know, you know, people say this, we know that when companies embrace diversity in all forms, race, gender, age, sexual orientation, etc., not only do we deliver stronger business results, but we also become a force for good in our community. I am so proud that our leaders have acknowledged this. So following the merger of Legacy Raytheon with United Technologies, our CEOs started to challenge our leaders across the company to identify ways to accelerate DE&I efforts. Our senior leaders, we started to hold open, honest conversations, at times difficult, with employees from diverse backgrounds and perspectives and experiences. And the reason why this was important, because a lot of times we say, we come to work. Why do we have to talk about all this stuff that's going on outside? And not understanding that what's going out on the outside is impacting people on the inside. And particularly when you talk about high-performing teams and fostering innovation. If I don't feel safe at work, I can't be at my best. So while we can agree that we come to work, there are still outside influences and issues that we have to deal with. So Greg did something that was phenomenal in that we had a CDO named, which was different because we had somebody who reported into HR, and now the Chief Diversity Officer reports into him. So that was number one. And then she established 4 pillars: workforce diversity, community engagement, public policy, and supplier diversity. And out of that, just similar to what other businesses were doing, we established goals, we established timelines, we established, long-term strategies to make sure, and then we provide updates to our employees and our stakeholders. I also said, you know what, we need to be on this journey. This journey is going to include, and by the way, 400 years of oppression does not get resolved in 6 weeks. Let's just be clear about that. So if you think you're going to check off a box, take Jocelyn Williams out of the conversation, because we're not going to do that. And yes, while I know that some people are like, give me those 5 things that I need to do, there's no secret sauce. There's no pixie dust. This is a journey. So we started the journey with 5 A's. One was awareness. Please don't come to me and tell me that you're an ally unless you really understand what that is. Then we go, okay, if you want to be an ally, what kind of ally are you? Are you performative because it looks cute and you get to take a really cute picture, kissing baby, shaking hands? Or do you really want to be an ally? But we need to talk about awareness. Then we go into attraction. How do we advance our culture? And then how do we hold leaders accountable? So as a part of our ally journey, I'm proud that we started establishing courageous conversations with our leaders. And we had never done this before. You can't talk about that at work. There's that book that's out there. You can't talk about that at work. I was like, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. But we're going to do this respectfully. And we are going to do this with everybody in mind. No shaming or blaming. We're going to keep everybody as part of the conversation. As a part of those conversations, we were inspired to then develop a series internally called Stronger Together. And this is where employees were empowered to share their stories. Now, this is where the magic happened. I could put together goals and timetables and metrics and etc. But the greatest impact that we had in terms of compassion is when people started hearing other folks' stories about being the only one, especially within engineering. Remember, I'm a part of a technology group. And even though your lived experience differed from mine, it was really remarkable not only to hear about the individual stories, but then people were literally in various forums pinging me going, Jocelyn, is that true? As an African-American, and mothers, if you have African-American sons, you have to have the talk about whether or not you're stopped by the police. Is that true? Or if I told the story, I don't have a son, but I would tell the story about, we live in a very nice area where my husband won't walk by the lakes by himself because somebody will ultimately probably call the police. And people are like, please tell me that's not true. And I'm like, it is true. It is true. I have been told not to move into certain areas because while myself and my daughter may be okay. My husband may not. He's a big guy. He's a big, dark guy. So he's intimidated. It was through people sharing those stories where we really were folks who never would have spoken about this at work. They were not only talking about it, but they were asking questions, that curiosity. And so this is what we need to do foundationally and fundamentally. Because when we think about what we need to do to advance our culture, another one of our A's, and attract talent into our organization, we need to be prepared to let people come in who they are, what they are, so they can be their most professional self. And then finally, I will say that a part of our plan, it's a multi-year, multi-pronged, and I only could touch on a little bit of it, that we are holding our leaders accountable to the overarching DE&I strategies. And again, those strategies don't include just checking off the box because it really looks good outwardly, but a comprehensive approach to build the infrastructure so we have from outside with public policy, community advancement, but we have inside where we are helping our leaders understand what inclusion means, what DE&I means, what it isn't, and then how does this play into the greater significant strategy of our employees so that they can work, feel valued, so that they can grow, and then they can belong.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. And you did a beautiful segue for Damon. We have heard some incredible things about what you all are doing in terms of compassion in your organizations and some of the impact that it's had on your colleagues. But Damon, would you mind sharing a little bit about how do you bring that same zeal to external communities and how?
Yeah, great question. I think one of the things that I love about IBM in particular is we're sort of known for solving some of the world's most complex problems. And, we're talking about some pretty complex problems here as well. And so it's no surprise to me that, because of one of our key principles, which is responsibility to others, and our global footprint, that, we're doing incredible things around the globe and hopefully inspiring many other organizations to do similar things. And so, a lot of that work is organized under the IBM.org umbrella. And it really focuses on just that global citizenship that we're sort of driving around the globe. So I think, though, a couple quick examples, and then one that I think is very applicable to this conversation. So just from the citizenship perspective, we have matching programs for nonprofits who are providing mentoring and tech skills and leadership skills to underrepresented communities and women in particular. And so those are incredible resources that, hopefully as many people as possible are taking advantage of. We also have launched and continue to expand our Embrace strategy, and pulling in external partners to really expand the scope of diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout communities all over the world. Because as we know, diversity and equity looks different depending on where you live. And then for me personally, there's one initiative that's near and dear to my heart as a design leader, and that's our Racial Equity and Design initiative. And talk about an underrepresented profession. How do we get more Black and Brown designers in the mix? Because as we know, design has a tremendous impact on what gets put out into the world, right? Everything from technology to fashion and everything in between. All sorts of impact there. But I think of all the examples, what's most important, I think, in how organizations can support communities, and especially underrepresented communities, is through skills development and job creation. I think, we have a whole portfolio of ways we're trying to address that gap. And we call it a new collar initiative. And so it's how do we provide access to skills development and jobs in very non-traditional ways. And so some examples of that are we have new apprenticeship programs where there are no degree requirements. We have a P-Tech program with a network of high schools and colleges and other organizations that have partnered with us. And it stands for Pathways in Technology. And basically, in a nutshell, what that is providing college level courses within a high school context and accelerating those candidates' ability to enter the workforce. We have one of our newest ones, partnerships, again, a big consortium that we're leading and a part of, which is called 110. And that's about bringing 1 million careers in the next 10 years to Black talent in America. That one is pretty incredible, so check it out, 110.org, spelled out. And then the last one that I'll bring up as an example is our tech reentry program. And this is where, experienced technologists have left the workforce for a while. Consider like mothers who have taken time off for a number of years, and having a path to get them reintegrated into the workforce as smoothly as possible and as effectively as possible. And so it's these kinds of initiatives that really kind of break the traditional mold that I think is probably one of the most impactful ways that organizations can affect local communities and, really drive that actionable compassion that we talked about at the beginning.
I love it. Thank you all. And some of the incredible people who are listening have asked some questions in the chat, in the Q&A that you all could put in the chat. So Jocelyn, they want the 5 A's. Someone got 4, but not all 5. Damon, you just gave a bunch of different things. If you could just put those things in the chat to everyone, people would deeply appreciate it because they are taking notes. They are taking notes. So we are going to move now to some of the incredible questions that were pre-submitted. So the first one, and we will start off with Jocelyn for this. Jocelyn, how do you all maintain compassion in the face of current events, demeaning people of color and especially women, and even in everyday moments of meanness, inconsiderate comments, and downright racist cruelty? How do you maintain compassion in the face of all of that? You are muted, passionate, wonderful woman.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So phenomenal question. So much has happened over the past 2 years with many people, women, people of color, including myself. And when faced with meanness, inconsiderate comments, and you're right, downright cruelty, I think of the greater good. Not because I'm a martyr, not because, I have this pie in the sky dream, but I think of the greater good in 2 ways. Number 1, professionally. Number 2, personally. I'll start with the latter. It's easy to give up and give in. When you think about transformation or necessary change, I think growing weary isn't an option. I think about those who came before me, and in some cases, dragged out of beds and murdered in the middle of the night or hung by a tree for standing up for social justice and what is right. I certainly don't have those kinds of experiences. So who am I to grow weary just because I receive hate mail? Okay. And people say nasty things. I think about my daughter. She is in her first year of college. She's 19 years old. And I think about the world that I want her to work in, to thrive in, to live in. I believe it's going to be her generation and the generation after that's really going to change the world, quite frankly. But her mama is here to prime that pump. I think about my colleagues and their families. I can consider you and your family just as much as I consider mine and my family. As a leader in an organization, I want you to be able to feel valued and feel heard. I want you to be able to bring your best self to work. As long as I am in this position for such a time as this is what gives me the strength and the inspiration so that I can maintain compassion, meeting people where they are, even when they frustrate me and I have to walk away and find a woosah moment. Okay, Jocelyn's not gonna say anything right now because this is intense. Let me just walk away. And I'm not gonna sugarcoat it because it is hard at times. But when I do walk away and relax, I push onward because I know that a more just, equitable, and inclusive society, I believe in the art of the possible. I know that it is possible, but it requires, and I'm going to go back, Betty, to what you said. It's not about Jocelyn. It's not about Damon. It's not about Thalia. It is about all of us together, working together. It takes the villagers and it takes all of us. We don't have to operate off of scarcity mentality because there's enough of the pie for all of us.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Thalia, do you want to weigh in on that, or do you want to move on to another question? It's completely up to you.
Wow. How do you follow Jocelyn? You know, that's
I will give you another question. That's why I gave you choice.
Let me take
You want to try?
Yeah, let's jump into something else. I love
All
her
right.
answer, by the way, and I totally agree with everything she said.
Nice. So, Thalia, earlier, Damon brought up this idea that is so true, and all of you as business leaders know it's true. We think about business in terms of business success. But how do we enable leaders to see that compassion is critical to business success?
That's a really great question. Business outcomes are the result of our people. So let's start there. We cannot be successful as a business if our people are not feeling as if they belong, as if they're in an environment where they can thrive. So as a leader, we're charged with starting there. And Jocelyn, you actually did say something a minute ago that is so critical. As a leader, we have to practice understanding that it is not about me. I have to make decisions as a leader that I may not make personally, but I have to think of the greater good. And so as a leader, any leader in an organization, we have to start with, and I'll say this for BMS, it's about our patients. Everything we do, we're coming in to fight for medicines and to create medicines and treatments for patients. That is what drives us. So if we keep that in mind, we can start with, okay, as an individual, can you bring your authentic self to actually meet that end goal for us, to help us get to that end goal? That's the question every leader should be asking. Am I creating an environment for my team as individuals to be their authentic self, to bring their best to the table? And by the way, I want to weigh in on the word diversity. I don't think diversity is always about the color of our skin, the gender that we are. Diversity is about those experiences. And so you want to make that environment so inviting for others to share all of that. So as leaders, that's what we should be developing as leaders, to answer your question.
Thank you so much. And I love that you're continuing to remind us of the expansion of diversity. Diversity means difference, and there is a plethora of ways that difference can appear. Damon, someone in the Q&A asked about how they can access those programs. So if you'll put that in the chat later. But now I want you to answer this question that came in just today from Jane Lindsay. Jane said, "Good morning. My name is Jane. And as an autistic adult, I know the experience of social shunning and loneliness in the workplace. At the same time, my autism lets me create so many things and ideas. What does your company do to embrace the talent of people with disabilities?" Damon?
I love that question. And I am proud to say we have an incredibly strong neurodiversity program that is in that long laundry list of examples that I should have included. I was trying to be brief though, because I didn't want to come off as talking too much about IBM, but no, it's incredibly important. And if I put it into the broader context of the question that Tali was just talking about, you know, for organizations to be successful, especially today, where, you know, the challenges, the disruptions, the amount of change that was hitting organizations pre-COVID was incredibly high. Now, post-COVID, it's immeasurable. So organizations' ability to innovate, to be creative, to adapt is key in order to drive success going forward. And how you get that innovation and that creativity and those, you know, those new ideas is, like Talia was saying, the diversity of talent that you can bring to the table. And if you don't have a strong multi-dimensional diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, you're not going to get the most diverse, talented people possible, and your competitors will, and you'll be lagging. So the business, the business strategy is tremendously supported by a robust diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. And I think the direct correlation to individual success, team success, innovative ideas, successful products and services in the market is a direct correlation that can't be underestimated.
Thank you so much. We have 5 minutes left, and I want to ask this question to any of you or all of you if you so choose. It's from someone anonymous. They wrote, "What about the human drive of competitiveness, as well as the tendency for selfishness? How do we address and coexist with some of these inherent human tendencies?" Thoughts? I thought it was a great question. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Anyone want to tackle that? I see you, Jocelyn.
Look, at the end of the day, I am highly competitive. There's a difference between my competitive nature and my compassion for others. So I can be competitive with myself to do and be the best that I can be. I could be competitive somewhat to coworkers in that I want to be able to rise to a level if they are exhibiting a level of which I'm like, okay, let me rise to that. But within my psyche and my makeup, it's never to step on somebody else's shoulders, crush somebody else in order to lift myself up. That is not a part of who I am. So I can be competitive with myself and competitive to want to be the best that I can be without being competitive in a way that you're obnoxious. Because we have those obnoxious employees and coworkers. And it's, again, I'm not a martyr, but I could wish more for all of you if I know, again, I go back to the greater good. If it's going to solve something for the greater good, I can wish more for you than I wish for myself. And particularly if you bring something to the party that I don't bring, okay, let's go. If this is going to be a part of us getting better, I can rally around that. So, I don't know if that actually answered the question, but I would say, then start checking your pride and your ego, and then start monitoring what your intent is and what your end game is. Is it for everybody else, or is it just for yourself? If it's just for yourself, you're going to find yourself on a lonely little island at some point. Just saying.
I love that. Thank you so much, Jocelyn. Thalia and Damon, final quick sentence snapshots that you would love to leave our audience with. Since we started with you, Damon, we'll go ahead and start with you now, and then Thalia will have last word.
Wow. Okay, put me on the spot. I think one thing that is incredibly important in the organizational context, which I'm trying to represent well, is this idea of culture. And I don't think we can define culture, but I think we can socialize and create the principles that create an environment where culture can thrive. And so in my personal definition, culture is like long-term or demonstrated behaviors over time. And I think it's up to leaders to demonstrate those behaviors that align to this strategy so that the rest of the organization can organically create that supporting culture.
Thank you so much. Thalia.
Yes, I'm going to piggyback and jump in where Damien just left off. One of the core values of Bristol-Myers Squibb is inclusion. And it does work when everyone is intentional about making that a part of our culture, bringing that to the table. I think also you mentioned the word accountability earlier in the session, holding each other accountable for being intentional about making sure every voice is heard, making sure everyone is being able to come to work and be their authentic self. That is what's really important. So as organizations, again, an organization is a group of people. You can name a building, but it's a group of people. And if we agree as a group of people that this is the way we're going to behave, then we're also agreeing by default, I think in some ways that we're going to be accountable to one another for being that. So that's important.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Thalia Mingo. Thank you, Damon Diener. Thank you, Jocelyn Williams. And thank all of you for joining us today. And special thanks to our sponsors of this session, the Massachusetts and Texas Conferences for Women, State Street, and the Boston Globe. You all will receive an email soon with a link to access today's session. And please be on the lookout for the next session in this series coming this fall. Have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Mm.